Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Northern Kentucky University political scientist Michael Baranowski. I'm joined today by my conservative counterpart, Cleveland area attorney and defender of freedom, Jay Carson.
Hey, good morning, Mike.
Hey, Jay. So I think I mentioned at the end of the weekend show that it isn't just ending birthright citizenship that's on Donald Trump's day one agenda. It's a pretty packed day, isn't it?
It's going to be a busy day, and you and I can speculate as to some of these things. I think are pretty doable, or let's say certainly within the president's authority to do. Others, like we talked about before, the birthright citizenship, it's unclear exactly how he would do that or would be able to do that. The other thing that I as I go through this list is some of these things I'm not sure you can do in a day just by the nature of the logistics behind them. But with that, Mike, I'm going to launch into the list of some of the promises of things Trump says he's going to do on day one, and we can kind of comment as we move through. Number one, he will end the war in Ukraine.
Well, let's start that. Didn't he say that he said, I will get it settled even before he becomes president? So that's like a pre-day. So it's good you started with that one, right? Because
yes,
that's
so that's day one as far as what he can do there. What he can do before he's president. I think to some extent there has been, he's been involved in some sort of back and forth diplomatic discussions with a lot of foreign leaders, more so than I think Senator Logan would have been. Was it Senator Logan or Representative Logan with the Logan Act back in 1801 or whatever it was, would have been comfortable with.
But the rules are different for a president-elect.
They're letting that slide now. Where they were less forgiving last time. But so I think there is actually some sense that there's progress to be made, and even from the NATO allies down to Zelensky have indicated sort of more readiness to perhaps reach into sort of the other piece that I think makes that, whether or not on day one, but renders that a little more possible is Russia's recent big setback in Syria. I think that does change the equation a little bit. But that is sort of day one or before day one. Your other thoughts on settling the war on day one?
Well, on that, I think if there's going to be any sort of settlement, it's going to obviously have to be some sort of a situation where Ukraine cedes land that Russia
some amount of territory.
Yeah. And now, while at first that was completely a non-starter, even Zelensky is now saying, well, we're probably not going to be able to kick them out of all of Ukraine. And in fact, when you look at public opinion in Ukraine, back in 2022, something like 70-80% of people said, we should fight until victory till we kick them out. But now, I think an October survey from, I believe it was Gallup, said that just over half of Ukrainians said that, well, we need to have a negotiated end to this war as quickly as possible. And so I think Zelensky is just bowing to the reality that life in Ukraine is just horrifically bad, and it's been that way for years, and people just can't handle that much more. And at this point, they're saying, if they want parts of eastern Ukraine, we need to live our lives, and this is just too much for us. So Russia's dealing with its own problems with, inflation and just being on a wartime footing with an economy that's not that strong and the sanctions. So, I think this is going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen before day one, but I do think that it certainly will be priority for the Trump administration, though I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if there weren't some sort of deal where Ukraine makes some territorial concessions and there's sort of an implicit understanding that they will be considered for NATO membership later on. But, I don't know how that's going to work out exactly. So I'll say that is something that Donald Trump can certainly move along, especially given the fact that it seems very clear that he's less interested in providing the sort of support for Ukraine that the Biden administration was. And so I think that's going to, unfortunately, in a way, maybe strengthen Putin's hand. Because I think he says, well, we have a much larger industrial base. We have a lot more manpower, and we're willing to hang. I think there might be a ceasefire agreement, but I don't think there's going to be. That was
going to be my next question. Do you think that there could be a ceasefire on day one?
I don't think so. I think there'll be negotiations, but I think neither side really wants to enter into that. Ukraine doesn't want to.
I wouldn't ceasefire if I were.
Well, Ukraine doesn't want to enter into this from a position of weakness, but they also have the concern about, well, will our position get even weaker over time? And so that Russia then, I think, even more, or even has even less of an incentive, because if they think less support is going to be in the offing, they might just say, well, we'll just hang on for a few more years and eventually we'll get much more of what we want. And so I don't think this is going to play out the way Donald Trump thinks it's going to play out.
Okay. The next one is shut down the border. Now he has said, basically, I want to close the border if Mexico doesn't immediately stop all illegal immigration into the United States through our southern border. I will be closing the border. Now, I don't. The president does have the authority to do emergency closures of the border, but do you see I think there is something he could do in terms of much like what Biden had asked for, the closing of if numbers exceeded 5,000 per day. So I think there is something there, and I think he could put on an order that probably would withstand constitutional scrutiny for a temporary closure of the border.
Yeah, I agree, and I fully expect that. And in fact, this is, I don't know, a couple of years ago when you and I were talking about this, and I sort of took a careful read through all of the relevant legislative authority I could find, and I think that he could make a reasonable case for not just doing it temporarily, but potentially even longer. Now, that would certainly be challenged, but I think that's something that's
I don't think he could do a permanent shutdown. I think you would need congressional authority to do that. And even to do this, I think there's going to be a good question, right? Because here's where Trump has tended to get in trouble with executive orders is the show your work portion, indicating that this is not an arbitrary capricious policy. This is, based on emergency, so forth. I guess what this reminds me of is the so-called Muslim ban, which he instituted briefly in his first presidency. Now, I think that could have been constitutional, but the way they went about it wasn't. And it just came down to a show your work type thing. So
yeah, but I don't think people. Well, I think there are plenty of people who don't appreciate the economic ramifications of closing the border. Right? I mean,
and I think that's something else when we talk about closing the border. What exactly do we mean? My sense is yes. I think they would say, oh, okay, well, yeah, we're still going to allow your container trucks to come through, or that sort of thing.
Don't worry.
Closing the border, maybe we put closing in quotes.
Yeah, well, it's like, don't worry, the fentanyl will get through, right? I mean, that's. Well, seriously, right? Because the vast majority of it gets through these regular, normal border crossings, and that's the real. If that's your concern, and certainly that's one of Donald Trump's big concerns.
I would, I'd push back on that because I think that's sort of a known unknown.
What do you mean?
We can say, look, we get we find a lot of fentanyl coming through.
I see what you're saying.
The regular border crossings, but we don't know how much comes through that we don't catch.
Sure, I'll revise. I'll say the best estimate or the best guess of people who study this sort of thing suggests that the vast majority of the fentanyl that Americans are using comes through legal border crossings. And if Trump actually closes the border, we will certainly, or closes it to illegal crossings. I don't even know how he does that on day one, because as you said in the weekend,
you don't have a wall.
Well, yeah, exactly. I guess there'll be an Insta wall, or I mean, even when you said in the weekend show, you have someone at the border with a gun. Well, there's a lot of border. There's a lot of border, and it's not something you can. So a lot of these things, when he says he's going to seal the border on day one, well, of course, that is just physically impossible to do. Now, he could issue an executive order. Now, that might take that would take years to actually play out, certainly on the ground, and I think that's what a lot of people don't necessarily appreciate.
I'm James McComb, reporting live from home in my bathrobe and slippers. Tonight, we're talking Dunkin' Polar Peppermint Coffee. Gene's here with the latest. Gene, do you copy?
The home with Dunkin' is where you want to be.
This episode is brought to you by FedEx. FedEx knows running a small business is hard enough without the hassle of shipping. That's why there's FedEx One Rate. With FedEx One Rate, you can ship your holiday packages cheaper than the post office for as low as $14.50 for small boxes. Visit FedEx.com/OneRate for details. Exclusions apply. Valid through January 19th, 2025. FedEx One Rate. 2-day retail shipping, one flat rate.
Well, what about the reinstituting the Remain in Mexico policy?
And that's a little different from closing the border, but
right,
and certainly he's going to do that.
The same idea is that as it stands now, someone who comes seeking asylum is sort of said, okay, here you go, and here's your hearing date. See you in a couple years. Whereas in this case, there would be, at the places where we have them, someone with a gun saying, no, you can't come in, remain in Mexico, and then you can come for your hearing date.
Yeah, and that's certainly something he said he will do, and I expect him to do that, and I would, I expect that the tariff threat against Mexico is sort of a leverage, because that's how it happened last time, right? He said he wanted to do this, and Mexico said no way, and he said, well, don't make me get tough with you guys. Well, okay, we'll do it. And so, yeah, I expect that to happen again, and certainly I think you can have valid concerns about that on a humanitarian level. I certainly do. I think it's certainly a lot better for asylum seekers, for their safety and security, to be in the United States and to be in some of these areas right outside in Mexico. But I also understand the other side of the argument. And so I guess I'm a little bit torn on this. It's not my ideal solution. My ideal solution would be that we would have for the last few years been building up much better immigration processing or asylum processing infrastructure, but that clearly did not happen. And so I don't know if I feel this is the best of a lot of bad alternatives. I'm pretty much okay with come on into the country and we'll get to you when we get to you, but that's obviously not going to happen.
Right. So next, in sort of following up on that, they pledged mass deportations. Now, to me, this is something I think you can very much say, okay, I'm going to order these mass deportations, but actually following through on it is something else. There was news about a week or so ago that there are some million or so people in the country now who are subject to deportation orders in that they've been ordered to be deported, and but either they have not left voluntarily, or we can't find them, or they've not actually been deported, they're still here. And I think that is a logistical problem, that you can't simply say I'm going to deport people. Now, you can start with, here are folks who are here illegally who we have arrested and we have in custody. I think he can certainly do those sorts of things. But the actual deportation is going to take time and resources, and it's not something you can do on day one.
Yeah, and at least one formulation Trump said he would begin.
In fairness, he says, "I will on day one. I will launch the largest deportation program in America." Doesn't say he's going to have it all done, and the idea is to get the criminals out.
Yeah, and I certainly, and it's pretty clear he's emphasized getting criminals out or people suspected of criminal activity out first. But I have no doubt in my mind that we will see the largest deportation operation in American history in this second Trump administration. And so I think also that he certainly has the authority to do this, but I also think that he is going to find that it is far more complex. As you said, it's one thing to issue a deportation order. It's another thing to deport millions of people per year, which is kind of what's being talked about. And I think that's not only going to be a logistical nightmare, also there's going to be increasing pushback from the business community on this, because the extent to which people
rely on immigrant labor.
Exactly, for so many basic kind of things. And so I think there's going to be some serious pullback on this, simply because of logistical and economic realities. We hope you enjoyed this preview of our supporters exclusive midweek show. If you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter. Supporters get ad-free access to all of our shows, membership in our Politics Guys Discord group where you can join in on the conversation, and other benefits at different levels of support. To become a supporter, go to patreon.com/politicsguys. You can also support us through Venmo, we're @politicsguys, or through PayPal. You'll find all of our support links in the show notes, as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you'd like to get the midweek show, but you're not in a position to become a financial supporter, that's not a problem. Just send me an email at mike@politicsguys.com, and I'll be happy to get that set up for you.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,